So welcome back to our discussion video on one-sided limits. This is still Erica Enriquez and this is part 3. For this third part, we go to our last type of function and that is the radical function. For radical functions, and we consider limits related to the radical functions, there are times when we need to consider one-sided limits. That is when the value inside your radical function is 0. And take note, this is only for radical functions having even indices. Why 0? Well, if we look at the graph of our radical functions, these are the square root of x, the fourth root of x, the sixth root of x, and the eighth root of x. Nakikita natin na ang domains nila lahat ay in fact non-negative real numbers. So therefore, 0 is a point where the graphs break. And so, doon tayo nagko-consider ng one-sided limits. Say for example, kung yung limit na pinapahanap sa inyo is say limit as x approaches 0 ng square root of x. Do not make the mistake to quickly say na 0 yon. No. Kasi we know na here we are only making x approach 0. So therefore, the radicand here also only has a limit of 0. Hindi mismong 0 yung value sa loob ng ating radical. So, in fact, we have to know at which side of 0 we are making x approach. Kasi, kung ang ina-approach ng ating radicand ay some value close to 0 but say to the right of 0, then yung limit nun ay in fact 0. However, if you take the square root of a value that is near 0 but to the left of 0, dahil negative siya and ang mga radicals natin with even indices only have a domain na non-negative, this in fact does not exist. So this one is ambiguous. You will need to consider one-sided limits. And that applies for any f of x here. So actually, yun yung nakalagay dito. These are the tips given to you in your lecture video. So let's illustrate that through examples here. So I'll go to number 5. So we have here the limit as x approaches 3 ng square root ng 9 minus x squared. If we substitute x equals 3 here in my radicand, what I get is 9 minus 9, that's 0. So actually, this applies dun sa aking useful tip. And in fact, we need to consider one-sided limits here. So I wrote here the corresponding one-sided limit. So I have a limit here as x approaches 3 from the left and limit as x approaches 3 from the right. Try to factor out your difference of two squares here. Bakit natin siya gustong i-factor? So that we see the expressions involved sa ating radicand. And furthermore, makita rin natin how 0 is being approached. Our x here approaches 3 from the left. Okay. And then we have to ask, how are the expressions here in my radicand affected if I know that this is the behavior of my x? So I have two expressions here, c3 minus x, tsaka c3 plus x. Let's see what their limits are. So dito, I have 3 minus x. And as x approaches 3 from the left, 3 minus x approaches 0. But I also have to know at which side of 0. So like what we did dun sa previous, kung nalilito, it's okay. Pwede tayong mag-test value. No? Pwede natin kunin, for example, 2.9. Substituting 2.9 here in 3 minus x, what do I get? 0.1. Okay, and 0.1 in relation to 0 is where it is at the right side of 0. Here, it turns out ang limit natin ay 0 through positive values ina-approach. Next tayo, as x approaches 3 from the left, what is the limit of 3 plus x? Substitute lang rin natin ang ating 3. What I get is 6. No need to consider at which side we are approaching 6. Because take note, ang concern kasi natin dito ay yung sign. Kung ina-approach ba si 0 through positive ba or through negative ba na values. 6 being a positive number, regardless kung sa left or sa right ng 6 tayo nag-a-approach, it's a positive number pa rin. Ito na lang mismo yung gagamitin natin. What are these limits for? Para yan dito. Pang-guide yan sa atin here. We know na as x approaches 3 from the left, 3 minus x approaches 0 from the right. Meanwhile, 3 plus x naman approaches. Multiplying these two, so a number close to 0 but positive, times 6, what you get is still a number close to 0 that's still positive. So in fact, dun sa parang comment ko kanina, this is an example of a square root of 0 plus. Also falls under your third bullet here sa tips. And mula sa ating tips, at sa binanggit ko kanina, kapag ganito, we're safe. What you get as a limit is 0. Yung original na hinihingi sa atin ay yung two-sided limit. No? So, we also have to consider the right-hand limit. Tayo ay magfa-factor muli. Ganun ulit ang process natin, no? Here though, we are making x this time approach 3 from the right. How are the expressions 3 minus x and 3 plus x affected? So dito it is 0, but we need to know at which side of 0 we are approaching. So a possible test value is say 3.1. Substituting that to here, what I get is negative 0.1. And in relation to 0, where is negative 0.1? Negative 0.1 is in fact nasa left side yan ng 0. So 3 plus x naman yung isa pang expression here. As x approaches 3 from the right, the limit of 3 plus x is 6 pa din. I'll just write it here as a guide for us. Okay, so that their product is still a value that is close to 0 but negative. No? So yung comment natin dito, yung symbol natin dito ay actually 0 minus. And here, this applies sa fourth na bullet natin. Kapag ang radicand mo ay approaching 0 through negative values, hindi yun pwede for radicals with even indices. So therefore, your answer here does not exist. Combining the left-hand limit and the right-hand limit, because one of the two limits did not exist, hindi na rin pwedeng mag-exist yung two-sided limit niya. Just coming from our previous theorem nung part 1. No? So therefore, does not exist ito. And that's our final answer. So number 6 here, in fact, is similar to number 5. If I substitute x equals negative 3 here in my radicand, I still get a radicand of 0, just like in number 5. So therefore, you will still need to consider one-sided limits here. But this time, kay negative 3 na. So please just kindly do this. Very, very similar to how you do this. Of course, just bearing in mind that you're letting x approach negative 3. I'll give you the final answer already, but please fill in the solutions. Ang sagot dito sa ating left-hand limit ay does not exist. So, wala actually na equal sign dyan, does not exist siya. For our right-hand limit naman, yung limit niya ay 0. So, therefore, considering the two one-sided limits, okay, hindi na rin nag-exist yung limit na ito. So, this, in fact, does not exist. Please do this on your own. But I included this kasi if we try substituting x equals 3 here, what you get is in fact square root 32. So I just showed that just to give an illustration of the first bullet here. Kapag may mga radicands ka na non-zero naman, hindi ambiguous yung ating limit. No need to consider one-sided limits anymore. Although here, parang pampalito ko lang. Nilagyan ko ng negative. Pero regardless kung x approaching 3 from the right yan, or even further kung yung two-sided limit na general na x approaching 3 lamang, ganun pa rin, isa-substitute nyo lang yung x equals 3 dun sa radicand, and for all those, wala namang nagsi-zero na radical. So we're safe, and diretso lamang yung answer. Ito yung sagot, 4 square root of 2. So please just confirm that, no? Pinasadahan ko lang siya. Ayun, so that's all for our discussion on one-sided limits. I hope you learned something. So just do some exercises with your teachers and on your own. Thank you for watching and happy learning!